let's be very clear from this passage this morning. Let's be very clear on what Jesus calls us to be and do and embrace as followers of Jesus Christ. He calls on us to understand that there are two ways. There are two gates. There are two groups of people. There are two ends to the roads. That's all. The issue that Jesus confronts the listeners on the hillside in Galilee 2 millennia ago is the same issue that he confronts the 6.5 billion people who inhabit this earth at this very moment with. You've got to decide. And he makes it very simple. There is the divine way, God's way, and there's every other way. Jesus simply says there is a necessity of choosing God or not. And there are only two choices. You either receive the King or you reject the King. Two gates. First, the narrow gate. John 14:6, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man, anthropos, generic term, doesn't mean gender, it means human beings. No human being comes to the Father but by me. The narrow gate simply is following the person of Jesus Christ. Now the narrow gate is unique. It is narrow, and it only allows one person to pass through at a time. So you know what that means? You enter the narrow gate by yourself. There is no group entrance through the narrow gate. The perception of the many people sitting on that hillside hearing that message that day was this. We are going to heaven because by birth we were born in the right people group. We are Jewish, and therefore we are all going to heaven. I live in America, so I must be going to heaven. I'm a human being, and God in my thinking simply loves all human beings, so we're all going to heaven. That is not the gospel that Jesus preaches here. He looks at every one of us individually and he says, you must enter the gate. And it's a narrow gate and it only allows you to pass through. Ezekiel, as he writes to a nation in captivity because of their own sin and disregard and disobedience to God and His messengers and His message, simply says this of their day. If Noah and Daniel and Job were alive in the day of Ezekiel, only Noah and Daniel and Job would be declared righteous. Because righteousness is non-transferable. My children will not go to heaven because I believe in Jesus Christ. If I rejected Jesus Christ and they accepted Jesus Christ, I would not go to heaven because my children believe in Jesus Christ. I will not go to heaven because I stand or sit inside a church building on Sundays, nor because I give money to the cause of that church. I will not go to heaven because I do the right things. That's precisely the contrast Jesus draws in the Sermon on the Mount. It's the issue of righteousness. And Paul says it so clearly in Romans 3, there is none righteous. Not one. You enter the narrow gate, you enter alone, you enter naked. You can take nothing with Entering the narrow gate means you deny self. Later on in this Gospel of Matthew, in chapter 16, verses 24 and 25, Jesus once again issues a clarion call to those men who are following him, that band of 12, and he says, take up your cross and follow me. Jim Elliot summarized that verse so well when he said, he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he can never lose. And in our day, in our culture, we've turned it upside down and inside out. And we've made life mean the pursuit of acquiring and having. Only to discover at the end of our life, everything we thought made us define life, we leave here. Jesus ultimately says in this passage in entering the narrow gate that salvation means you turn the sovereignty of your life over to God. And if He calls you to lose everything you have, to obtain it, to guarantee your reward in heaven, so be it. And if it means that you will be blessed beyond your imagination in following Jesus Christ, so be it. But you will hold everything in your hands very loosely. Salvation simply turns sovereignty over to Christ. The wide gate is characterized by self-confidence, self-righteousness, pride, self-satisfaction. If there's anything that characterized the spirit of Jesus' day, it was those words. They were self-confident leaders, religious leaders. They were so sure they were right. They were so smug in their own supposed righteousness. They paraded their self-righteousness in front of others and said, until you're like me, you aren't making the grade. Jesus simply said, that's false. He said, unless you're like me, you're not making the grade. They were full of pride. They were so proud of their accomplishments. They were so proud of what they'd done for God that they literally believed that God had to accept them. And nothing could be further from the truth. They were self-satisfied. They looked around and saw what they had and they said, man, look what we've done. We got it all. Well, when you enter a gate, it leads to a way. And in these two verses, Jesus talks about two different ways. First of all, he talks about the narrow way. It's the way of the godly. The great psalm book of the Old Testament, the book of Psalms, begins in chapter 1. The very first song in that psalm book talks about two different kinds of trees, two different ways, two different ends. The narrow way is the way of the godly. It is a hard way. Jesus makes this simple, but He doesn't make it easy. Those two terms are not equal. Something can be simple, but very difficult. And we have made the idol of choice married to the idol of ease, and we want it our way, and we don't want to wait. We want it now. That's why the marketing line, have it your way, is so effective for one hamburger chain.